thanks to Selenium Meetup and to Meetup for having me here tonight to speak. I will be speaking about writing automated tests using Python, Selenium, and Behave. And so the important question is, how do I get myself into this mess of writing acceptance tests with Python in a Python framework in BDD? So I basically started about 4 years ago in my test career as a manual tester, and I became interested in test automation where I realized I could make the computer do the boring things, because I was relegated to doing these regression tests that took 2.5 hours and only happened at the release. And the company I was working at, the releases started at 8 o'clock at night because that was when our business went down. So if I was successful and everything was beautiful, which you know it never is, I would be there until 1 in the morning. And I thought, this sucks. Like, it just, what a process not to have to go through. So I started to think, well, I need some skills here. So I found a free Python class on Coursera. I learned some code. Hurricane Sandy happened. I stopped learning code. And then I attended GTAC 2013, and I was hired from that conference for a job that was Ruby automation, based solely on the idea that I was willing to learn to code in Ruby and write tests. All of which was true. I mean, I said it. It wasn't like I said it and failed. I said it, but then I was like, oh God, what did I get myself into? However, I was really, really fortunate to learn the BDD style test automation from a former ThoughtWorks dev who was so very strict about how we wrote every piece of automation that we wrote. And he also went over Selenium API and a lot of different things that we used. And then in the job following that, I took a position that was a Python position, so I was a little more comfortable, it was a little more in my comfort space, because that was the language that I had been working with kind of on the side. And they wanted the Python tests in a Python tool that looked like Cucumber. So this got me to a point where I said, oh, crap. So I knew from some reading and some research that there were some things I could do to Cucumber to, Pythonify it. But it's not really what I wanted to do, because what I kept reading was that it wasn't like the greatest choice. And of course, everybody has their opinions about the greatest choices. And so I did some research, and I did want to do behavior-driven development. And, we have unit and integration and acceptance and smoke tests and all these different kinds of tests that we have. And I really like this quote from the Behave documentation, which is the tool that we'll be exploring a little bit tonight. BDD focuses on obtaining a clear understanding of desired software behavior through discussion with stakeholders. It extends TDD, or test-driven development, by writing test cases in a natural language that non-programmers can read. So BDD tools are basically tools like Cucumber and Behave, which superimpose this DSL, or domain-specific language, on top of your test code, which can lay, and mine does lay on top of a project of a wow, awesome. That's winning. Wow, I just blanked out a palm. So we'll get to that where I have words. It'll be really exciting for all of us. This is how I do a little teaser about what's coming up. So I chose Behave after looking at some documentation for several tools, and I chose it for a few reasons. One, it's open source, which I like because we can keep the project going as a community. We can find interested people who use it, and the more people who use it, the more invested we can become, so I do like that. Has good documentation. It has active community and development. And when I say that, I don't mean just the lay community or the user community. When I ask questions on the Google channel, like on the Google chat, Jens Engel answers the questions. So I get real answers from the people who created this. When I put up a GitHub issue, they're like, yeah, but why would you do that when you could do this neat new feature we just built it? Oh, okay, thanks. So there's that active development from the creators and the community, which I really do enjoy. The latest release came in, I'm gonna say, maybe September or October 2015. So, it is current as well as being active. It is staying current. It has a lot of the advanced features that Cucumber has, and it's getting more and more of them, including really customizable command line specs, which is nice if you want to run it in a CI situation using Jenkins, or if you want to do a YAML file and run it in Travis or Sauce or whatever. Like, it has that configurability, so you can get what you need to run it in a variety of higher level and scalable situations. And of course, sadly, one of my favorite parts is that it's supported by PyCharm. So I use that because it actually has behave specs set in the program. I don't have to do anything special. It's just in my IDE, writing my code, and it's like, oh, did you notice that you did this little behave thing wrong? No, I didn't. Thank you. So I happen to like that. Why? Not only why behave, but why a BDD system at all? Okay. First, for me, it's clear and easy to see what is being tested in a number of ways. The .feature files are more easily read and found than a one line that might be in the test code file of tests. So instead of having test and test and test, it's called .feature. In your repo, you search .feature, you find all the tests. And they are, then when you open it, as we'll see later, it says very specifically, this is what is being tested. So I like that as a person who has to build this system out and remember what it does and what I built a year from now. That helps me. And also, developers who are interested in running their tests locally, front-end developers, can easily see, oh, .feature files, this is what she did. So they don't have to spend all this time looking and digging for test files to try and figure out what it is that I've done. In my opinion, writing the test in the natural language first, so using like a given when then syntax, helps me to keep my automation focused on expected outcomes and possible negative outcomes. So it prevents me from saying, oh yeah, but this feature also does this, this, and this, so I need to test all these things, so I better write them in. It allows me to focus and then use each of those this, and this to create separate scenarios, or to decide, hey, even though this lives on this page, it's actually better tested as a part of that scenario. A good example of this is an e-commerce site where your path is through a variety of things. And so even though you order a glass on the glassware site, you need to check out that glass on the checkout site. And you might have different places for that. And some people might say, well, let's test everything related to the glass on the glass page. Do you want to test the customer journey? Is that part of your regression? Or do you want to test the glass on the glass page and all the glass things the glass touches? Having a natural language helps to kind of take those, for me, to take those outlines, those jots, whatever, and to actually bring them back and say, okay, what are the test cases here? What are my concerns? And how will this look in a running test? And how can I create a test that is very focused and very clean? Because I don't like these monolithic monsters of tests. It worries me. for a lot of reasons: flakiness, more failure, but also just disorganization. Reusable steps, which are available in a BDD tool like Behave, keep your code dry. For those of you who don't know dry, don't repeat yourself. So even if a step is repeated in 5 feature files, for example, the step when I log in, I'm writing it in one place. It lives in my login.py, and then if somebody changes login.py, I go in and change my, when I log in my login.py, I go in and change that page object, and then the method that holds that test, like the test itself doesn't have to change. None of the tests that use that have to change because it lives in one place. So I happen to like that as a tool for organization and for scalability, especially being on a small team of Jessica. So some features that are built into Behave. It does allow for tagging. So those of you who've seen or worked with Cucumber, it allows the same kind of tag control. The whip tag gives you the work in progress. I think everybody's got that. There's a few other built-in tags, or you can run any custom tag you like. I like this for a few reasons. I like it for when I'm developing, because I just tag the test I'm developing, and then I can just run that one thing constantly, build it out, it works, and then I can test it in the larger suite when I'm done. I also like it for development purposes. Having the list of kind of known tags for front-end developers means that they can run just the test they want against the feature that they've created as a stopgap, I guess, before they go to the staging environment. So they kind of have a sense of, I'm blowing the thing up before it even gets to staging, which is good. Having developers more involved earlier on in testing that's beyond unit and integration has been very helpful for me in the past. And I actually have a current Bitly developer who is using these tests in beta right now. And he put his first PR in with a picture of the past test. It was very exciting for me. So he's like, it wins. So I really hope it wins, because that would be sad. But using it for development purposes as well is very helpful. It is customizable to run against different environments, just like Ruby Cucumber. So if you have a development environment, a staging environment, a production environment, any kind of environment you want, you can set it up through the environment variables. And there's also a user data variable that you can set up, which we'll talk about later. They've made some scenario outline enhancements. I'm not sure, how many of you have used Cucumber at all before? Okay. How many of you used any BDD kind of tool like this before? Okay, so scenario outline is basically, I'm going to explain it because it seems like a lot of people are like, scenario outline? So a scenario outline is basically like a table. So instead of building 3 different tests, if you want to test an ATM account, and it has, you want to test a negative amount, a 0 amount, and a positive amount. And you want the usernames to be different, and you want the error message, you want to test like an expected error message or an expected message that comes up. So you got username, dollar amount, and error and message. You can make a table with that information, drop the table in to your test, and then write a test with 1 sentence that calls those variables, and that test will run it 3 times completely, even though you've only written it once with the table. So that's a big time savings. And it's also much more clean to read than writing, when I am John and I am broke, then I only have negative $10 and the bank is mad. When I am Jan and I got paid, then I am not broke and the bank sends me a happy message. Writing that over and over is very much a waste of time. It's a waste of code. So The new scenario outline enhancements allow unique names for each of those. So you could run only the broke guy test, even though it sits in a table of all the tests. You can run it without actually having to write it. So that's kind of a cool feature to make scenario outlines a little more usable that Behave just built in. It's built in with default parsers. So there's parse, there's CF parse, and there's regex. And regex is obviously extraordinarily helpful because maybe a website uses, maybe you have a menu, sidebar left menu of options that the user can choose from. So, for example, a fashion website might have dress, color, style, season, formality, but they're all in the same, it's all the same class, basically. It's all the same text. And instead of typing a line of a step definition that says, when I click on dress, when I click on style, when I click on format, you don't need that because the step is all the same. The code literally lives in a table. So when I click on insert regex matching here, then X happens. So you've simplified 10 lines or 10 scenarios into one, and you've coded it with regex matching. So parsers and matchers like that are very, very helpful. I found them to be very helpful for situations like that, like especially e-commerce sites where it is extremely repetitive because there are so many choices that one gives to customers. And then there's in Behave, which you will see in the examples, there's a context variable that acts like the self variable acts in Python, Ruby, pretty much any other language, but they've just named it context. And this is what allows information to be shared around the test directory. So it's also extremely helpful because if you set up something in the environment file, you can pull that into a test step definition file. So the ability to switch to pull your information around is actually quite helpful. So here's some other methods. You can do things before and after. So you can do a before scenario. There's that context variable. And it allows you to do certain things like maybe for each scenario, you want to start a new browser. Because maybe your scenarios are just, you really want them decoupled from one another. You don't even want the scenarios to touch each other. So if you really need that kind of granularity, you can have it. Before feature is a little larger. Before tag gives you even more granularity because you can say, you know what, forget about the structure. I want it before it says work in progress. You're allowed to do that. So they've made some nice features for before and after testing so that way that you can set up exactly what you would like to have happen to prepare your tests and to break them down. That might include, for those of you who have this ability, factories or something like that. There's a skip method that can be run before feature or scenario, and that allows for a runtime decision. So it's a little different than using the @whip tag, which lets you just skip it because you're working on it. The skip scenario the skip method is written in so that way that you can actually say, okay, if this thing happens in the test, then skip the rest of it. Because I don't want to waste the time running it because I know if X thing fails, all the other things will fail. So let's move on. I'll have a failed test. I know about it, but let me not take time dealing with that in the test run. And then the user data allows for a user to define its own configuration data. So, and you can do it via either the command line, a config file modification, or in one of these hooks, the before all hook. You can say, this is the server I'd like, this is the login I'd like, whatever you would like to see in your setup. So this is very highly customizable, is I guess basically one of the things I like about the newest version of Behave. What about other Python tools? Well, Cucumber uses something called RubyPython to fire a Python interpreter, And it is known to be brittle, but if you have a cucumber workflow and switching over to a completely new tool is a problem, and your developers want you in Python, this is a possible solution. So it's something to know about. Lettuce is another tool. It doesn't have, when I was first researching these tools, I don't know where it's at now, but 2 years ago when I was researching it, hadn't been worked on for at least 6 months at that point. It has not a lot of support for the things that are really cucumbery about behave. So if somebody who's worked in that environment before, which I had, and I was looking for something that was, in my comfort zone, there wasn't quite as much organization and ability to customize as I was looking for. And then Freshen is a plugin for Nose. So it provides the gherkin with the step defs, but you don't have the context variable that you can pass around to different places. So these are the reasons, these kind of things that I perceived as limitations. These reasons are the same reasons that I chose Behave to move forward with as the tool that I used the first time. So the structure of the code is, or the way that I structure my code, and I found it helpful, and I've of course got bit links at the bottom because I have to. No, but there's some bit links to some page object stuff. The behave layer, which is the DSL layer, the given, when, then, English stuff. And also for those people who work with teams who do not write in English or who do not wish to write in English, Behave, I think, has 24 or 25 different languages that it actually is written in, just as an FYI. So, if you have an offshore team and they're doing all the test writing, they might find it more helpful to write it in their native language and then translate it or have it translated. You never know your scenario, but just know that that's available. So this describes the tests. Then your step defs are your given, when, then, and these can consist of multiple page objects from multiple modules depending on what you were doing. And this is the kind of test code layer, so you won't, this is the layer where you're not going to see a lot of direct Selenium calls. If you're doing it really well, you won't see. This is strictly just calling those page objects that you defined with your Selenium. And then the page objects use Python Selenium. So here's where you get your Python Selenium API in. This is where you do your, find element, you do your expected conditions, wait for, if, else, not. There's an argument in the world of testing, because we don't have enough of those, about doing your verifies in this layer or not. I do them there, and there's probably 50% of the people who are hearing this, they're like, and then the other 50% are probably like, all right. So it's where I have them. It doesn't make it right or wrong in my opinion. It's what works for me in my situation at this time, and I may well change my mind, but because we are all allowed to do that. But what I do like about the page object model is that it requires discrete units of code to help ease the maintenance of page. So again, if I have that page object of the login, just that login object, and I have the name login as an object, and the password login. If somebody changes something about that, I don't have to go back through every test that uses login and change it. I go to where that page object lives in my little login module, done. And then that's propagated throughout. So I happen to like a page object model for setting up my tests. So getting into a little bit more of the meat, this is a sample thing that I did as a proof of concept. So if it looks stupid, for example, with a broken test sample and incomplete test steps, it's because it is. Because it was a proof of concept. But this is the file structure that you will need to implement should you wish to implement Behave. You can implement it within the front-end repository of whatever application you happen to be working on. And it can live, the sample test folder could be named Gobbledygook. It could be named Guitar Hero. It can be named whatever you want. Then features needs to be named features because the test runner actually looks for that. Steps needs to be named steps. The test runner looks for this. And then everything else is the feature files. I use PyCharm, so my feature files have that little green feature file thingy. And then my home.py is my module. So here's a sample of a feature test file. So you start out with the name of feature. You've got your scenario. Then given I go to Bitly homepage, when I sign in, then I am in Wonderland. So I wrote this because Wonderland doesn't exist, maybe, and neither did it exist when I wrote this test. So it's just very basic. You can see it's plain language that nearly anybody can understand. You can take business requirements, and even if you're not having business people write the test, which I never actually have had this happen before, where business people are like, oh yes, here's my gift link. It doesn't happen. But for me, it's helpful to be like, these are the test cases that I'm imagining, and they can read that. So it's more like I'm still writing the test, but at least I can hand them off and get a check mark or a, oh, we'd also like to see X, Y, and Z. So it does make my job a little easier in terms of communicating with them. Then the step definitions, from Behave, you can do import with the star, or you can import the at given, at when, at then. And then you'll notice that I've imported home, which is that module that you saw before in my file. And that contains everything that I need to keep pointing at this like you can see me point. It's not working well. And the home has each of those home methods. And then here's the page objects, which actually have since changed quite a lot. I started this out about 6 or 7 months ago, and I've actually split up the context, and the page has changed since I built it. But the concept is here, which is that your Selenium is there with your Selenium Python API. And you'll see that there's some hard-coded, name, password kind of stuff, which has since been replaced by some user data stuff, because as I said, this is a proof of concept. Oh, and also you may have noticed the last test. You know it is. So your environment, my environment setup consisted of just some basic driver choices and some environment choices that I could call if needed. And I can show you some of my actual code later if you have questions, like some of the working code that is not proof of concept code, but is real test code. But right now, we're going to take a look at the proof of concept runs. This is what happens when you run a Behave test. So you'll see this is just a screen recording. And so I just basically, I type Behave because I want to run everything. And then as I open the test, obviously the browsers pop open. And then it gives you the scenario, prints out the scenario. If things are going well, you get green. You also notice that you have the lines to the right where to actually find what line that the code is testing in your file. That was an on-purpose fail. And then when you have an on-purpose fail or a not on-purpose fail, you will get a really big stack trace, which is nice. When you have a non-implemented step, you get yellow. So it just lets you know, hey, I don't exist yet. and then it will give you the actual steps for how to implement that in your file. So if you're writing a really large test, that can be particularly helpful. Now you'll notice as we scroll back up to this failing feature, you've got this red, then a page object is gone. And as we kind of go down, it says wait until presence of element located by ID. I won't say a word, but you know, I can't find it, and so it's telling you. It says, you know, we can't find it, so you need to do something to fix that. Now, as you know, here's our passing test. As you know, as Selenium users, sometimes where the error isn't where the error lives. So it tells you, oh, okay, the real problem with this, it says, oh, your error's here because of the timeout. And you're like, yeah, but it timed out because I know that I needed to click here, and I watched that click action not happen. If you're not testing headlessly, you know this. So, you know, so I like that there is a full stack trace there because you can kind of dig a little bit and get some information and scope beyond just saying like it failed. Like that is very helpful to me. So some caveats, which I'm sure, again, these are things that as a Selenium using group, you know, different browsers like different locators better. XPaths can be different across different browsers, while HTML-based IDs or CSS tend to remain more consistent. Notice I use the word tend, and there are reasons I use that word. One of those reasons is that different websites are built differently and may require different approaches to help Selenium locate an object. So I put IE, React.js is different from, and then blank because everything else I ever tested. So React.js seems to like CSS locators, but some people don't write them with enough detail. So it's, you know, needing to go back and forth and say, okay, how do I as a QA person contact you as a developer and work with you so we can get this to be very testable, written with testability in mind. And that's a very difficult challenge with any automation project, I believe. Preventing race conditions from causing test failures, I feel, is very tricky, especially in sites that use multiple asynchronous actions or sites using something like React, where the actions happen a little bit differently than in a normal JavaScript site. And none of this makes writing automation smooth sailing, which I know I've been in situations where people are like, hey, where is it? Why isn't the test automated yet? Why isn't it done? And there's not a level of realization of complexity about what it is that people are actually asking for. So I think that that's also important, not only in choosing the tool, but in communicating the tool in which you choose to use. Because regardless of how, you know, great and neat a tool is, this tool, Selenium, really is what's underneath this all, has been built to test the entire web. So we're not going to get it in one tool, in one shot, in one try. And I think people who don't understand our craft the way we do may say, oh, well, just do it. Doesn't Selenium work for that? Well, yeah, it does, or it can, but what caveats are in the way of making that happen? And what are the caveats of using certain tools to make that happen? So that's it. Thank you. And does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
So did Bitly ask to use a BDD tool, or did you present BDD to Bitly?
They asked for a Python tool, And so I decided that I wanted to do this because there's a very interactive community between sales and customer service and development, and I wanted to maintain that interactivity. And I felt that using a BDD tool in particular would help me to do that more than using a non-BDD test tool.
How would you rate reporting features of behavior? Like you run a test, you get nice reports on the web browser, stuff like that. And also, are there any tools that give feedback to CI? Let's say I have flaky tests. I want to rerun only those failed.
That I haven't implemented it yet on. I believe that we're going to go with Jenkins as our CI server since we're already using it for our unit and integration tests. I know for a fact that there's a plugin for Cucumber that does all of these things really beautifully. So one of my research goals for the next probably month and a half is actually to figure that out. So I don't have answers, but if you give me your contact information after we're all finished, when I get them, I will happily email them to you.
If you implement this kind of test to the deployment pipeline, how would you prevent it from breaking all the time?
Well, as we all know, Selenium has its flaky moments. But I think that there are some things that can be done to mitigate the flakiness of it. And something that I am looking to do to mitigate that flakiness myself is right now we don't have it on CI server yet, but we will. And so the way I'm implementing it is to actually set up all the dev boxes and also have it run on staging manually. And I'm going to start watching where things are flaky and where things are failing, because something I've realized is that as like building the tests, I'm building against my dev environment. I have data there that other people don't have, but I don't realize it until another developer runs a test and, hey, why did this fail? Oh, you didn't have this. And so understanding the dependencies before I say, okay, the tests are ready and we can put them in CI. No. And I think that happens more often than people would like to admit because of pressure to put things into CI. So my hope is that by using a slow rollout method and having it well tested against the environment in which we plan to use it. And then the third thing is I'd like to create different Jenkins jobs because I don't need all the things to be tested all the time.
How many, what percentage of your test data is stumped? Stumped meaning it can't data.
Oh, stumped? So we have extremely distributed systems that utilize different kinds of databases. So we can't use factory reserve stumped data at all in our systems. This is one of the complexities that I'm working around. So I'm working with DevOps to put some things into place that can be deployed into the environments as needed, but not as test fixtures because they can't be done that way, which is sad for me. Yes.
So yeah, to answer your question, there's Behave has formatters and reports. You can specify those on the command line or in the configuration file.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, there's a Cucumber plugin on Jenkins, which Jenkins just needs for you to specify the formatter of JUnit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just specify on which directory you would like to save that XML file. And then for the failing test, the way you rerun it, the latest version of Behave, which is 1.2.5, has a new feature called rerun, which basically you specify the file where it's going to store all the failure features and a scenario, and then after it finish the all run section, it will only rerun those failure tests.
Cool. The rerun I actually haven't tried, so I'm really
Yeah.
glad
It's
to.
really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, I'm definitely gonna use that. And then because then that helps in terms of like figuring out if it just screwed up because of timing issue or if you're
Right.
really in trouble. And like you said, you can format. So here's like my actual work. And like I have my tags at whip, and then I have no tags because I actually just did a presentation. So,
Can you zoom in?
maybe. Oh yes. Like, yay. I love it when things work. I'm in here. So yeah, so I mean, here's just like a sample of. Well, I'm sorry, I don't. What's your name?
Carlos.
Carlos. Here's an example of what Carlos was saying about. You can do a lot of different command line things just to make your output the way you want it. So one of the things that I need to do at Bitly is I need to check if a shortened link, or I like to check if a shortened link is actually, it's shortened here. I like to make sure that it's coming out on the page the same way. So I've actually grabbed the text elements from the elements, elem.text, and then done an assert statement and then printed the assert, just so I have a record of that. And then if it fails, I can also look quickly and see, okay, did it fail? Did it not fail because of this reason or because of another different reason? And that's that's a file configuration that I did inside of the test. So yeah, there's a lot that's very, very configurable there. And then I think if you do, is it two? Like, yeah, so you can get just a basic help of all the cool stuff that you can do and all the cool output that you can get, like just basic command line stuff. But I think they've released new, like the rerun feature. That's I didn't even think about that. I haven't used it, but there's more about that in the documentation, which is definitely more extensive than this little help, which just gives you your command line fun.
Hi, I have two questions. So one was regarding, this came up more recently though. Have you researched around more apps like Angular or Rails, like they prefer different environments like Protractor?
I haven't actually done research around anything except Rails, just because I worked on a Rails app and tested it with Cucumber and Ruby, and built it out in Ruby. But Bitly specifically wanted a Python solution.
Okay.
So, I went with this for
There's some special invoke. Protractor is like basically based out of Selenium as well. It has some specific JavaScript invoking functions, which then especially in Selenium, you're directly using Selenium driver. Pouring it by that. So it has more like when the JavaScript is finished rather than pouring a video function.
Okay. Definitely something to check
That's
out.
like using React, so.
Yeah, that's Angular. The second question I had is how do you collect results? Like if I'm trying to run them weekly or on a particular frequency and in a headless machine, how do you collect results back? Or do you let's say you are executing 100 tests, do you sit down and actually observe the test?
I mean, frequently as I develop them, I do.
Right, of course.
You know what I mean?
Of course.
So I see them, but no, I don't observe them. So at the the tail end, basically if you do a general run, this is just what you get.
Right.
And then which is a very basic, and then you get your more detailed kind of a thing. But I'm curious to find out. You said
I didn't understand the question.
Looking at results.
Collectively, if you're running is your results at a particular frequency, then how do you observe them back? Because this is one thing that I'm facing currently. We are traditionally using Robot Framework for doing other stuff, but we have a special UI testing, which is going to be working on some tools related to Selenium, and we want to integrate the results.
What's your CI system? Oh, Jenkins has a tool built in to do that.
For collecting the results of behave. Okay.
Or I don't know for Behave, but for Cucumber they do.
Cucumber they do, yeah. But I,
It's standard, like, it's just pre-read that good.
No, like there's full charts. I'll contact the developer that I worked with
okay.
who installed it, because so if you give me your name, I'll see if I can get in contact with him, and give you the information for like what specifically he used, because it had charts, it had graphs about like specific tests over time. It was really ridiculous. Yeah.
It's something I was asked, like if you're running UI tests on a frequency, then they need to look at the results.
Yeah.
I cannot sit down and.
Right, and it's not like just like pass or fail.
Definitely.
It also it's the kind of thing that you could give to somebody
Okay.
who wasn't.
So he means that like the tendency of the test results of each cycle, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that the Cucumber plugin and Jenkins is fully compatible with Behave.
Okay.
So that gives you that option.
I am glad you are here. No, I really am. That was what I had to research. Like that was research, like pre anybody asking me. I was like, I haven't figured it out. And you're here to tell me, thank God. And that's amazing, because that just made my life better as QA only number one and only at Bitly. So thank you. Any other questions?
So, hi.
Hi.
BD, like, by definition, is also driving development.
Mhm.
And we've been talking about the tool, which makes sense for the context of this data.
Yeah.
But there's also the process component. And
Yeah.
do you still do the 3 amigos or 4 amigos or any amigos how many friends you have? And how does that's always been kind of our struggle as far as the BD is great as far as from a tool standpoint to aid in correction, but to go to that next step and actually have that development.
I think that goes to a lot to company and process. And right now at Bitly, basically I sit in on all the project meetings and all the project team. So like there's project planning where it's like, the super far out, and then the project team meetings, which is like sprint planning meetings. And for each of those, I kind of ask, what does done mean? What does this look like? And then I take that and I will just basically write test cases that I can imagine against it and throw that back out to the team. Because just to throw it out back to the project managers, like to say, hey, do you think these are going to be potential issues? I see these issues because X. I see these other issues because Y. What do you think? And then as the JIRA tickets are made, we get much more granular into QA.
Is what you're doing tied back to the story. So is that part of the definition of done is already passed?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Especially as they're getting now put into the Selenium server and put onto dev machines, that's definitely become part of the definition. Is that the devs are running them before they even have to go to pass. So.
At Bitly, does the developers help you write tests?
Yeah. Not in the way that you would think. Like not in the traditional sense of they're not saying.
Unit tests, I'm talking about functional tests.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying given when then. The developers help write. They help write acceptance criteria, which can be iffy because they're also building the product. But we have QA test labs. So and remember, I'm the only QA, so I'm not sitting in a room by myself. We take the success team and the customer insights team, so sales and customer insights, buy them pizza, put them in a room. I divide them in half. So half the team has a test plan, half the team does exploratory testing, and then they all log their bugs in Jira. And we unearth a lot that way because they're like end users, and it does the dual like they ask us a lot of good questions, such as, you know, and we also have some developers who come in and test other parts that they have not written. So a lot of times they're like, wait, does that supposed to look like that? Is this what? Real? That's really confusing. So we get great feedback from them by, you know, half of them we give the plan, half of them we say, okay, go explore, you know, do what your customers would do, bust it, try. You know, do what you think your most difficult customer would do. But the developers do help out with test plan writing. It's more informal. Like they don't sit and say, "Dear Jessica, here's my test plan," you know. But I'll say, "Okay, hey, what are your expectations for this?" And they'll email me back. Well, here are some use cases that I think are really important that we work around. And they'll detail out the use cases pretty well. Like either product or the test team there is easily the most, or not the test team, the dev team is easily the most test focused dev team I've ever worked with. Like by far, it's kind of a requirement, like that people are paying attention to that. I think just because I haven't been around for very long, and you know, they haven't had this kind of automated QA process in place. So there's been a need to have attention on test development. Yeah.
How do you deal with?
No, go ahead.
How do you deal with passwords in your feature files? Do you store your passwords, like test passwords, in feature files?
I actually store them in the environment file for the 3 people, because I have 3 basic accounts. Like I said, I can't stub data. I can't use a factory. I can't do anything. So I have 3 test users, and their password data is in the environment file of my test code. And so by passing the environment to the command line, you're also passing the user.
Is this environment file checked into any sort of VCF, like version control system?
Yeah, Git.
Okay.
Yeah, all this code is in GitHub.
Okay.
It's like part of it's like right in our main repo.
Okay. Yeah. One of the issues was because my security director won't let me store, you know, passwords, like test passwords even, into our VCS. So I was just wondering if you had any solutions.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because I think it depends on the information that one could obtain with a test password and how concerned your organization is. And one could only obtain very fake information with my test password and shorten some links.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I thought it would be hard.
I'm gonna hack your shit and shorten links. So I think, you know, they're less concerned. I think it's less concerning than when I was testing financial software, and they were like, "You can't do that."
Yeah.
Like, no. So, but you know, it's really different. Really depends. I had one back, and then Carlos.
Do you have any advice? You kind of alluded to talking over some things with your developers and using React as part of system scripts and things like that. Do you have any general advice or more specific advice to point to on the interwebs about starting a React site from scratch? If there's any naming conventions or other conventions or practices or file naming that you recommend using?
Don't use React. No. No. I think something that I see very often. I can give a specific example about it, just so you know the kind of thing to avoid, because I'm not front end developer. But like, there's this thing that we have called action panels, and we have probably about 8 of them that pop out depending on what you click on to make it pop out, right? The problem I'm experiencing is that I have these action panels where it pops out the one it's supposed to pop out. I click on it, it pops out the other action panel that's just called action panel. And then I look for the action panel 3, we'll call it, that has a similar text as another action panel, and it calls, even though I click on the one that's supposed to open up, the other one with similar text opens up. Because it's just action panel. And so I'd say in the class or in the ID, and it depends on if your developers are pro using IDs or negative using IDs. If they're pro using HTML IDs, just do it. It saves so much like of everything in life. But if for whatever reason, including a React.js reason that I may not be aware of, like you cannot use HTML IDs, which is the saddest thing in the whole world. First world problems, but still, it's mine. So try to get them to add an ID to the CSS, or to be a little more specific, if they can, in naming a piece of that. So that way that when you go to try and identify it, you can. Because it's really, really difficult when you can't. So those are like, that's something I'm asking for right now, because there are 2 tests I can't write because I get random stuff. Well, it's different. It's just like it's like different than what I need. Different than what should happen, and it's not what happens when you click the button on the site. It's just that I feel like Selenium is like looking, grabbing something that matches, and it's just the wrong thing. But it's not Selenium's fault. I'm gonna blame poor Selenium.
Yeah, so I had a similar situation that he was trying to describe. So what I ended up doing was I had a sample JSON file with all the users that I needed with fake credentials. So it was our job, or each development job, to copy that file into a users.json file, and then just replace all the credentials locally, and then it will start, using whatever users you wanted to use. And then it's a plugin called configuration file, where it automatically generates those user profile based on, your definition, and then it automatically executes all the tests.
Dude. He's like full of useful information now. I mean, thank you.
So what I did was I created a user class to model the users for different applications, and then had the password, generated for that, so that you could run a test and then you won't actually see any of the user data. You just need to know that. You just know that, like the test pass or something like that.
Right.
You specify actions, and then say you log in, and it gives the email is generated as well, password generated, and then if there's an error, then it spits out the plain text. And so that was my solution. I was just saying there was some other way to do it.
There is.
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't
know.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Carl? Yeah.
Do you do any sort of A/B testing? And so how do you handle trying to get a different successful?
We do A/B testing, but because I can't stub data, it's kind of good, because I just flag the permissions I need on the user that I use for the tests. So, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I use feature flags.
Yeah, so you read if feature flags on, do something. If not, skip.
But I would do that if I was using different data for different tests. But I only have one user, so it's, it's like, I'll just give that user permissions for the, to run the test continually, and then, but I run it locally with the flag off just to see. But if I know like half the suite's gonna fail, I'm just gonna flag my user until I'm told to test like B or something like that. So yeah, so I don't really have that problem as much. I had it more. There are other places where I face that problem more often, other companies, and they wouldn't even tell me they were A/B testing. I was just like, dude, how come this happened? They're like, oh, we're A/B testing. Thanks. Thanks a lot. And so then it was just basically I was told, and we did not have feature flagging. And so, we're A/B testing and you don't have feature flagging, so just ignore the broken ones. That's been my experience, unfortunately. So Carlos may have some better advice for us. I don't know. but I'm sorry. I will stop picking on you. Yeah.
Does Behave have any like nested scenarios or reusable scenarios feature? Like I know Cucumber doesn't have it, but what about?
You can do it. You can do it. They have. I'm trying to think of how they call it. They have the specific ability for you to be able to reuse a step where you want it to, So yeah.
But can it kind of like, let's say, can I have a step that calls another step?
Yes. Yeah, that's reasonable. I'm not sure if it extends out to scenarios, but I know it has it for steps. So yeah. Any other questions?
So what stage of the process did you divide up the users into the exploratory testers and content? Was that
As soon as I got there.
Oh, but not in a particular, like, it just seems like when you're close to a release cycle, the developers are so busy fixing stuff, they don't have time to do that.
It's closer. It's when it's either on staging or behind a feature flag, depending on what the change is and how confident.
So why were they so insistent on Python? You said it about.
They're a Python shop.
Oh, okay. So it's Python.
All Python.
So that makes sense. So
I mean, except for the React stuff, but
so
like
if they were Java, Python.
I would have been learning some Java. And that's why I know Ruby. Because I worked for a cucumber shop, two of them. They're like, learn Ruby. I said, okay, I need a job. So, I learned the language that lets me keep the job.
How do you do performance scalability testing?
A lot of that is handled by our DevOps team. So they do most of our performance and security.
And is there a special integration layer or like it just seems like unit tests and regressions and integration may not be captured by unit tests. So where does integration fall?
This is always tricky, partially because nobody else really knows the answer. Like whenever I ask people this, it doesn't matter what company I work at. And I've worked at 4 startup style companies. They don't know the answer themselves. So depending on the developer you talk to, some say, well, I write unit tests. And they're like, holding down their unit test for it. And then others, you talk to somebody who's either like higher up on the chain or does things differently. Well, we don't really do unit tests. We it's like a mix, some unit tests, but like some integration. I mean, it's just, they're in there. I swear to you. And then other places, where, it's like the tests we're running, but some do unit tests, some do integration tests without unit tests. So it's a really hard question to answer because I've never actually received a straight answer. I would love to, but I haven't. So sorry.
When you mixed up the people, did you have them eat their own dog food and test their own stuff, or did you mix them up and test somebody else's stuff?
The devs test their own stuff before they release the staging. The test labs that we have, there are maybe a few developers, but mostly it's 20 sales people and customer insights people. So they haven't made the stuff. They don't know what it looks like. They know what they think they're getting, maybe, but they, for them, it's as much of an exercise in using and looking at the product as it is for a new consumer, which is why I actually really enjoy having them test the product, because they are the closest thing that I can actually get to to a tester, to somebody who has that, who can put themselves in that mindset, is somebody who's there because they don't have another option. So it's like, just using the resources that I have at the moment. Yeah.
I think that touches on the question of, do you use the same, if you're going to choose a tool, do you use the same language as the stack that you're testing, or does it matter?
I think it depends on the QA team, or if there is a team. And I say that in all seriousness because if I'm the only person, I'm in a Python shop, I want to be writing in the language that the developers know, because advanced things are going to happen, and I want to know, like, is there a way I could code this better? Is there a way that I could do this better? So when I'm one among many developers, then I like to work in the language. If there were a QA team of 3 automators and 6 manual with a manager, I would say let's use the tool that works the best for this particular testing job or whatever, and make a commitment to learning something, but I wouldn't be so language focused, because I think that with more than 1 or 2 people automating, especially if they have different background sets, it makes it a little, like, it's simpler to have different areas of expertise. But when I'm, the lone automator in a room of developers, I don't want to be the sole person writing Ruby, like, at all. I have no desire to be that person.
So would it be fair to be like, that's how much dependency you have in your developers as far as like really they can help you?
When I'm alone, yeah. Like, it's like, who can I ask a question to? Who can help? Because I can spend an hour on Stack Exchange, or I can spend 5 minutes pinging, somebody and saying, hey, here's this thing of code, and is there a more efficient way? Or, I'm trying this for loop and it's not working for some reason, but I can't figure out why, because everything seems right. Is there a syntax error I'm missing, or whatever? Or, just things like that are so easy to run by somebody if they can just look at it, and not from a theoretical perspective, like, well, in Java, this is how a for loop looks, so it seems like it should be okay, but I don't really know the syntax. No, like, I need somebody who can be like, you forgot a colon. I mean, it's like that simple, like it's like having someone to proofread your work, and you're a writer, and it's so much easier to proofread when I'm alone if I know I have other people who know what they're reading. Anyone else? All right, thanks so much. There's lots of amazing